Hello, this is my voice, these are my hands, and this is the Novation Circuit Rhythm. I wanted to do a quick video showcasing some features and things I've worked out while learning how to use the Circuit Rhythm, as I've spent the last several months making a 5-song EP exclusively on this unit. It's called Mental Clutter by Bay Mud. You can listen to it anywhere you listen to music, Bandcamp, Spotify, or wherever. I encourage you to do so and let me know what you think. It was all made on this guy right here. So we're going to take a look at some of the features, some of the things I liked about using the Circuit Rhythm, some of the things I don't like so much about it, but in general, just go through some features it has. Okay, let's get started. And the first thing I wanted to bring up is how the Circuit Rhythm organizes its files, its projects and samples. And that starts with packs. Packs are your grouping of songs and samples, and there's a limited amount of space in each pack, 64 songs, a certain amount of samples, but you can have multiple packs on the same card. So I have a 128 gig SD card in the back here. So far, only 5 packs have been created, but there's a lot more room. I just got started. The good thing about it is it forces you to stay organized. So if I know that when I load this pack, that's my Mental Clutter EP pack. Those are all the songs and samples and files that I need for that. Now, this pack here could be a collection of Korg Poly6 samples or other synths that I wanted to sample and do something with later. So I know what I'm loading the moment I kind of get into it. I know I'm focusing, but the kind of bad thing about it is you can't access samples that aren't in the current pack. So if I suddenly decide, let's bring in a Korg Poly6 sample into this pack, I can't do that on the fly. I'd have to kind of use the Components app and move things around and blah, blah, blah. You can't access things that aren't in the current pack. But it does force you to stay quite organized, which if you're like me and you have a million files and gigabytes of folders full of disorganized samples and half-finished projects and ideas, something forcing you to being a bit more organized isn't really a bad thing. So I kind of leaned into it. Once you get into your pack, each pack can have 64 projects in 2 banks. And the way I chose to do it in this particular case was use each column to represent a track I was working on. So on the Deluge and the Circuit Rhythm, the way I like to work is I'll start with a project idea, and if I like it, I just keep going with it. But if I start to divert from it and I'm not sure if I want to go back or I'll save different project states. So as you go down the row, some songs had more states than others that I was kind of experimenting with. And then on the circuit, you can use the Novation Components app to color code your pads, your projects, if you want to. You can see I started doing that, and then I got annoyed with having to connect to the computer and send that data over. So initially, the blue was kind of where I was starting. The turquoise was, oh, I like this idea, let's run with it. And the red was, don't save over this. This is the one. Because once you get the muscle memory down, it's harder to save over things. But initially, you can hit save and the wrong pad, and now you're kind of, uh-oh, what did I do? But you can also back all this stuff up to Novation Components pretty easily if it works for you. I had issues with components, which we can get into later on. But for now, so these are your projects. In this pack, I have 64 projects that I could access. These are my songs in each column. You can see there are 6. I only ended up releasing 5 because one idea just didn't finish well for me. I wasn't really able to push it in a direction I liked, so I stopped that one for now. And then within your projects, you have 8 tracks in each project, and each track can have 8 patterns of sequence that you can use, and each sequence can be 32 steps. So you can do the math and have all kinds of different variety there, which is great. And we'll get into scenes later because that's another big one as well. But that was one of my things that I enjoyed the most when I started working with the circuit, when I really got into it, was just getting into the top-down architecture and staying organized. It's easy. You can kind of lose track of patterns a bit depending on how you want to do that, but that's just my workflow. I found it very organized to stay with, okay, this pack means this row is this song, these colors mean this for a project, and then I would try to organize my track 1 was my kick and snare maybe, or just kick. Then track 2, tracks 1 to 3 were usually kind of drums. And then 4, 5, 6 might be kind of melodic stuff. And then 1 of 7 or 8 might be the bass, and 8 might be a resample and like a glitchy thing I can bring in. But we'll get into a lot of that in a second as well. Okay, so the next feature on the Circuit Rhythm that I really enjoyed was the overall sample slicing workflow. It was just so easy and fun and kind of encouraging. So to exemplify that, I'll start with the first track from the Mental Clutter EP. It's called Wake Up Pollinators, and it is based on an old acoustic guitar sample that I recorded into a Boss RC20 loop station 15 years ago and forgot why. The whole EP has a similar origin to that. So every song kind of started with an old sample or loop that I don't remember why I created in the first place. But when I sold the Boss RC20 loop station, I decided I would save the loops in it just in case I ever wanted to do something with them. So here we are. So this is one of those. The initial sample is an acoustic guitar recording that sounds like this. Again, I don't remember why I played this and recorded this, but it was important enough at the time for me to save it. So I figured, let's do something with it. The first thing I did was pitch it down a bit because I wanted a bit meatier sound. But slicing it was where the fun really began. So if I press note a second time, I get into this half-empty screen, and when I press these pads, the sample will play and it will create my slice points for me. And it's totally non-destructive. I can do it again and again as many times as I need to. So here we go. Okay, so I grabbed just a row there. They're not perfect, but it's a good example. So here we go. And you can see this one doesn't really start at the right spot, so we can just fine tune that very easily with the start and end macros here, the start and length macros there. So once you've got, let's say you don't like that, you can just do it again. So I'll do it really quickly. It won't be very useful, but there's another row. So you can kind of see already how much fun it is just to chop things up, slice, and mess around with a bit of a sequence order. So I'll show you how that turned out. This was what it became. Add some effects. Bring in the drums. A bit of bass. It's kind of a cello sample from forever ago. I don't remember when I recorded that either. So you're kind of off to the races. And now, I've got a pattern here with a different sound for that same sequenced sample. And there you go. You're off having fun making a track. So that's kind of the first thing I really found I enjoyed about the Circuit Rhythm was it was so easy to load up a sound, kind of cut it up, and then make it into something new, that it just, every time I turned this unit on, it just made me want to do something fun and weird and push me further. And the next thing I know, I was making almost complete tracks without much effort. It was fun. It didn't seem like I was working very hard. I was just having fun. And next thing I knew, I had a bridge chorus, and I needed a verse or something else, or, it kept pushing me in fun directions. So that's like a big plus for any unit in my book. Okay, the next thing I wanted to talk about is something that's been present, I believe, on all circuits so far, because I had the original for many years before jumping to the Deluge, which I do still love, by the way, but it's sample flip. So sample flipping becomes an important feature on the circuit because you only have 8 tracks to use. So if you're going to use tracks 1, 2, and 3 for your kick, snare, and like a hat, now you've only got 5 tracks left to do anything else with. So you could easily use all 8 tracks, just establishing your percussion section of your groove or your beat. So in this case, if I'm trying to make an EP or a whole song just on this unit, you kind of end up having to economize your tracks very carefully. So in this track's case, this is called Early Days of Time Travel. It's the 5th track on the Mental Clutter EP. This one I used sample flipping to combine a couple of my percussion sounds onto the first track. So I believe I'm jumping between these samples. It's pitched down a little bit, but it's something sort of like this. So yeah, I pitched it down a little bit, messed with it, but you can see I'm using the same sequence to go through these 3 sounds. So it's really kind of saving me a lot of space because that frees up the rest of these for different sounds. So you hear I add things, build it up, and then by the end, you're getting into all kinds of different variety. But it all started with the sample flipping to allow me that space. And again, this song was based on one sample from that same RC20 loop station. It started like this. So everything else kind of became, there's the original sample pitched down, and then we add that sample flipped drums to it. But so the blessing and the curse of sample flipping is that now these three sounds all have the same effect send. So for instance, if I wanted to add more reverb to my snare, the kick drum's getting it too, or delay and vice versa. But in a scenario where you're in a challenge trying to make one EP on one unit only, you really just do what you can, and you turn those limitations into creative decision points. So sample flipping is a huge thing on the circuits since the beginning, and it's great. You can take advantage of it. You can have some fun just banging out beats, and it frees up some tracks. Okay, the next feature I took advantage of on the Circuit Rhythm while I was making the EP is the options for pattern settings. Now, the original circuit didn't have all of these options, if I recall, and some of them came along with the sequencer on the circuit mono station, which I do have somewhere. I should bring that out more often. And those changes were inherited into the Circuit Rhythm and tracks. And there's some interesting non-destructive things you can do with your pattern direction and length and playback that don't require you to take up one of your precious 8 patterns per track. So things like this would be your length. All of these are lit up, so that means I'm playing the full length. But the moment I want it to cycle shorter, now it's playing half, so anything red is not going to play. These are your speeds. Starting here is normal speed. This increases, this decreases. The manual tells you, I believe one of them is a quarter, one of them is eighth, one of them, it might be a dotted. You just have to kind of get used to remembering which ones they are, or look up the manual, you'll see what those correspond to. And then here you have your direction. So this is normal, this is reverse, this is ping pong, so forward and then reverse, and this is random. So in this particular track, I wanted to have a melodic element over top of everything. You'll hear it started like this. Again, this is a sample from that old RC20 loop station, pitched down, sequenced on the rhythm, and then we add some other elements like drums, some bass, and eventually we get into some things like melodies and fill it out a bit more. But you can start to run out of patterns and scenes pretty quickly if you want to have a lot of variety. So one way to achieve that is through the pattern settings. So if we go specifically to this little melodic breakdown that I've got here, both of these elements, simple melodic samples, one's more plinky, one's a bit more kind of ghostly, I guess. They are operating with different pattern settings to give a bit of variety, and that can change as well as I want. So if I play here, you'll see this sound is progressing normal. That lit up being there means normal, but this guy being lit up means it's ping pong. So you can see it's going forward now in time, but then as it hits the end of this 32-step pattern, it's now going in reverse. Whereas this item here, you can see this lit up means it's normal, straightforward direction, but then the speed is slowed down. So it's playing at a slower rate than this one. Now, I can easily alter those if I want. If I decide I'd prefer, let's turn these other two items off. Now you've just got this one sound, and now if I press this, once it gets to the end, now it's random. Now I have added all these steps in myself, so they're all in the right key. There are no scales on the Circuit Rhythm, so everything that's playing random is still within these 4 or 5 notes that I decided it wanted, because I sequenced those steps individually. Now, if I want to go back, it's as simple as pressing this button again, and once it's done playing through once, it will go back. Now, see, it's going back to forward, and it'll reverse direction in ping pong. So you can get a lot of variety without losing your patterns or using up certain patterns, because it's non-destructive. You can try things out, you can mess around. If I wanted to say limit the length, press that, and now this particular sequence is only going to play the first half and repeat itself. And you can do it off rhythm or off even numbers if you want to have more of a polyrhythm going. And again, non-destructive, back to normal. So really powerful, useful feature if you want to get some variety out of your sequences without using up one of your 8 patterns per track. Okay, the next thing that I really loved about working with the Circuit Rhythm is the resampling workflow. I mean, it's a dedicated sampler, so it really has no excuse not to be good at sampling, slicing, and resampling, in my opinion. But they really nailed the resampling workflow to me. It's easy, it's fun, it's encouraging. It makes you want to do it again and mangle and experiment. So to exemplify that, let's take a look at track 2 from the Mental Clutter EP. It's called A Quiet Celebration. Basically, it uses one sample for 99% of the song. And that sample, again, from the old RC20 loop station. It's just me playing instruments, layering them, and doing a bad beatbox over top. So there's a lot of character to this sample, and that ended up being this. 2 different versions of it, pitched down, pitched up, sequenced differently and sliced differently. Then you get some staccato elements. That's really the same sample, just using the slope and distortion and then sequencing a bit of a rhythmic pattern to it. And then same idea. There's some drums in there that kind of got sampled into it via resampling. But mostly, again, 90% of this song is that one sample just mangled on the rhythm. So one example, let's say we like this, and we want to add something to it and resample it. The Circuit Rhythm has really interesting grid effects. The grid effects I find most useful in a resampling capacity, or maybe a live setting you can mess with, because they're applied to everything. It's not like the delay and reverb where they have a send. Once you turn the grid effects on, they're on everything. So I didn't use them as much in the actual EP production, but I use them a lot in resampling. So for example, we'll play our little sequence here. Let's reverse it. Add some filtering, some phasing. Okay, let's say we like that. Now we want to resample it. Let's go to our sample browser. Now anything red means it's open, so we can use it. You can see I've used up most of these guys. There's probably a page or two with some room left. And when I select that sample, now we can set our options for what we're doing with this right now. So first thing, monitoring, we want to have monitoring on so we can listen as we're resampling. Resample on or off is very important, because if it's on, you're recording what the circuit rhythm is playing. If it's off, it's probably because you're recording what's coming into the circuit rhythm and you're sampling a synth or a sound you want to use later. And I've done that a lot as well, and it's very fun. And then you've got threshold recording, which is super useful. It means that I can hit record, nothing's going to start recording until I hit play and it hears a song or a sound. So let's do that. So we've got it, it's already recording. We've got our effects and our sequence set up that we want to do. You can set, actually you can set fixed recording lengths or not. So in this case, we'll turn fixed recording lengths would be a bar, 2 bars, 3 bars, whatever. If you want it to, that way you know you're recording exactly the length that would fit your track. But in this case, I'm just messing around. So I'm going to turn fixed recording off. And that means the recording length is governed by me telling it to stop. So record is on, play. Okay, let's grab that. That's good enough. Turn our grid effects off. Now we can go back to our sample browser. It's done. We can hear what we recorded. So there, we've just resampled the track. And now if we wanted to, we can use this, chop it up, add it to our track in different ways. So that resampling workflow to me is super easy. There are actually tricks I've seen other people do on YouTube where you can preset a sequence and then sample into that sequence. So it starts playing and is sequenced the moment your sample is available in this slot. Some quirky little fun like looping tricks you can do with it. But in any case, so that type of experimentation and resampling is how I ended up with all the variety that is on this track. All these sounds are that same original sample, just resampled and then chopped up and sequenced differently, adding things like the percussive elements, which that's still the same sample. It's just been adjusted and resampled so many times it sounds unrecognizable. So that's super fun on the Circuit Rhythm to me, and it just makes me want to keep making music, which is a great thing. Okay, the last couple things I'd like to touch on, go back to that idea of maximizing the limited track and project space on the Circuit Rhythm, because if you're going to make an EP or even just one song entirely on this device, you really need to squeeze it for everything it's worth. One way to do that is to take good advantage of scenes. So if I go into track 4 on the Mental Clutter EP, which is called Come On Baby, you will see I've got my mixer view up here. These are my mute states. So these tracks are now all active. These ones are all muted. And then you have your patterns, like I've mentioned before. So these tracks are going to play pattern 1 each. These tracks are playing pattern 3 each. These lights down here in the mixer view are my scenes, and they save both of those things. So if I go here, only track 6 is playing, and it's playing pattern 1. The moment I go here, now only track 1 is playing, and it's playing pattern 1. But then when I get down here, all but track 7 are playing, and they're playing a variety of different patterns. Now track 1 is playing pattern 4, track 6 is playing pattern 2. So it saves your mute states of your mixer, and it saves what patterns those tracks are playing at the time. So it's great. You can chain together. So I can just have these two going back and forth. It'll now play the next one in a second. You'll hear. And then it'll go back to this guy. But if I want to extend it so it plays all these 14 patterns and then loops on itself again. So while it's doing that, I could be messing with things like the effects sends. Add some more reverb to things, some more delay, or the grid effects. So we could use the macros. Basically, your hands are now free to do whatever you need to while your sequence is playing that you've carefully kind of selected and curated. So it's great for being able to record this into another device later, or just giving you hands-free for recording automation, for instance. So scenes are something that are really, really useful and important. Now you'll see though, you only have 16 of them. You have 2 rows of scenes per project. So 16 scenes that you can choose. That's where you get back into taking advantage of your pattern settings and chaining patterns and other things, because you're going to run out of scenes eventually. Which does take us to my final feature that I did use in the EP that really saved my butt a little bit as I tried to stay only on the Circuit Rhythm. And that is chaining projects entirely. So if I go back out to project view here, you'll see again, the way I adjusted it was each of my columns represents a track I was working on. And you can see track 4 here went all the way to 6. It went to the other side because I had so many ideas I was working with. And that's A Quiet Celebration song, which we looked at a little bit earlier with resampling. But there was a bit of a part in that I wanted to press further. I wanted to go further with and make it its own thing a little bit. When I got into these there are these percussive elements that play. You can hear this stuff. Once I started messing with this idea and resampling these staccato elements, I really wanted to give them their own space, breathe a little bit more, and I had run out of scenes and patterns to do so. So the easiest way to do that was to create another project. And now when I switch to that project, I've got these scenes created and ready just for that new project. So I've got my middle kind of bridge breakdown that is almost a track on its own. So it's going to build and play through all these scenes to the point where it gets to all my percussive elements are playing and I'm messing with the distortion and the macros. And then when I'm ready, I go to this third project now to bring it all home. And now I've got these scenes set up to take advantage of kind of the big climax of the song, and I can slowly outro by removing elements and bringing it down little by little. Maybe I could fade things out with the macros, or maybe I just want to kind of get to a point where I've got not much going on, and then you can stop. That's not how the song ended on the EP. You'll have to listen to it to find out, and I hope you do. But so chaining songs is pretty powerful because it allows you, if I had wanted to, I could have had 3 different projects with 3 different sets of 8 samples, 3 different sets of patterns and scenes, and really switched it up. But I wanted to kind of keep it within the same wheelhouse of samples a little bit, so I didn't quite blow it out like that. The only thing you can't do, this is a con in my book, I think some people might consider this a pro, but you can't, if the sequencer is playing when you change a project, it inherits the tempo of the initial project. So if this is what I'm playing, it's at 85 beats per minute. No matter what I choose here, the next project, if this is playing, is going to be at 85 beats per minute. So let's do something here and see, it'll switch. This is something I didn't end up using, but it's also at 85, and that's not supposed to be. That's supposed to be at its own project tempo, but it's trying to keep everything really smooth for switching between, almost like a seamless DJ set, which isn't personally the way that I work. I like things to have a start and a stop and different tempos. So if you wanted to have a breakdown in the middle of a song that was a totally different tempo, it's actually not very easy to do that unless you're stopping. So the moment, like this song is at 66 beats per minute. So because the sequencer is stopped, if I press this now, we're at 85 again. But if the sequencer were on, this would go to 66 when I switched over, because it's trying to keep it seamless for you. So you just have to keep that in mind when you're chaining your projects together. It's non-destructive. It always saves the project BPM to the project, but when it's switching them, sometimes it'll choose, if the playhead is on, it'll choose that tempo and keep that for the next project because it wants it to be seamless for you. So you just have to understand if that's what you'd like or not. Personally, I would love to be able to turn that off for some cases and on for others, but I'm not sure if we're going to get any more firmware updates for this unit. But in any case, those are some of my must kind of use features when I was sequencing, and just some things I had fun with using the Circuit Rhythm. I could do a full pros and cons list, but this video is already getting pretty long, and I'm not sure how interested you guys are in the Circuit Rhythm, because normally I do Deluge stuff, which I also still am very much in love with the Deluge, and there's more Deluge content coming because there's a lot more features coming for that unit. But in general, the big plus for me, aside from the fact that last year when I got this in Canada, the main retailer here was blowing them out for cheaper than a Volca. So how could I say no? These features and this kind of fun workflow is very much worth the price of a Volca to me. But there are some pros and cons. I think the big thing it has going for it is every time I turn this unit on, there's something fun I can do very easily. And that is a real plus to me, because it means that I just lose time making fun music. I didn't even think I was going to be doing music, and next thing you know, a half hour's gone by and I've got a whole new project started because I was just having fun. And if gear can do that every time I turn it on, I'll be turning it on a lot, first of all, and I'll just be having fun and really appreciating it, instead of constantly looking at what's coming out in Superbooth, or what's the new piece of equipment, what's the new upgrade for this, or why doesn't it do this. So I love how simple and easy the workflow is on the Circuit Rhythm. It's just so much fun. If you have one of these and you want to know more about it, or if you don't have one of these and you want to know more about it, leave a comment. I'll see if I can do any more videos that kind of show this guy off a bit more. In general, I'll be doing some videos here and there on the Deluge coming up, but do me a favor. You don't even have to like and subscribe. That's the standard YouTube way to go. Just go listen to the Mental Clutter EP wherever you listen to music, and just give it a couple plays, and that's how I would get some reward out of all this journey. I appreciate everybody who's watched this far and who will go listen to that EP or any music I've made and come back to another video another time. So let's go make some music.